Hi, I'm Dr Susan Galletly from Central Queensland University, Australia. This PowerPoint, Let's Optimise Early Literacy, models for exploring the impacts of orthographic disadvantage towards optimising literacy development, goes with a poster that I presented at the IARLD conference in Florida in October 2023. If you go to my website, susangalletly.com.au, you can download the poster, this PowerPoint and lots of other conference presentations, resources and what have you. We're going to consider 5 useful models that I have developed in my work with Professor Bruce Knight and colleagues at CQU. The literacy component model, the transition from early to sophisticated literacy model or TESOL model, the differential disadvantage model, the orthographic advantage theory model, and the 10 changes model. But first, let's briefly consider why are models needed? Why do we need to optimise early literacy development? And I'm very much talking about optimising early literacy development for children who learn to read English in Anglophone nations such as Australia, United States, United Kingdom, and what have you. Here are the reasons. Because orthographies make an absolutely massive difference in earliest literacy development, and that precipitates further advantages and disadvantages that nations experience. English readers lag far behind children in the world's many regular orthography nations, for example, Finland, Estonia, Poland, Spain, Greece, Italy, Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan. So Anglophone nations such as Australia, the UK and USA need to close this gap because currently, by international standards, we aren't managing orthographic complexity well enough for our beginning learners, and quite likely our children's greatest risk factor for vastly slow literacy development and high likelihood of severe difficulties in reading, writing and learning is simply having been born in an Anglophone nation that isn't managing orthographic complexity effectively enough for its children. So what's an orthography? Well, an orthography is a spelling system, and every orthography's level of complexity creates its extent of cognitive load in lessons and across the whole of literacy development, and demands for effective cognitive processing skills in beginning learners. And English is an excessively complex orthography. It's actually at outlier level. It creates extremely high cognitive load and demands for effective cognitive processing, and our kids are often only 4.5 to 5-year-olds when they've got quite low cognitive processing skills. Now, other nations have orthographies more complicated than us, okay? So, for example, nations such as Taiwan and China, whose orthographies are far more complicated, they use 2 orthographies. They have their main orthography, and they also use a beginner's orthography for when children first learn to read and write. This ensures low cognitive load and demands and rapid, easy early literacy development. Let's have a look at that table. So English, 26 letters, 44 sounds, way over 560 spelling patterns. Finnish, 23, 23, 23, or perhaps just under 30. Italian, 22 letters, 25 sounds, 33 spelling patterns. Do you see how those regular orthographies, they're keeping everything consistent? There's not much more learning than the kids learning their letter sounds and then how to sound out words to read and write. Okay, Korean, 24, 24, 24 approximately, and Welsh, 29, 29, 29. And while many people in Anglophone nations don't realise it, most nations use regular orthographies, and their children are very, very soon confident, skilled, independent readers and writers. So let's look, 2 ends of the continuum, Finland, and then we'll go for Australia, UK and USA. And Thai is probably more complicated than English, okay? But Chinese, Japanese and etc. are not, because they use that beginner's orthography first up. They count as regular orthography nations. So Finland, 2/3 of children are reading well when they start grade 1 without instruction, because it's so easy to learn to read Finnish. It's only got 23 letters with 23 sounds that always say that single sound in words and what have you. approximately 3% have difficulties. Wow. Okay, only 3%, okay, and most of those will catch up to adult level accuracy, because that's what kids have there. Once you know your letter sounds, you can read and write all the words, okay. So most of the kids who are delayed catch up to adult level accuracy by grade 2, and those with severest delay catch up by grade 4. Wow. So now let's look at our Anglophone nations, Australia, UK, USA, and generally studies show 2/3 are at high school level by grade 6. Oh my goodness. Now that is after the kids with severest delay have caught up in grade 4. Okay, so grade 6 for word reading and about grade 9 for spelling. So our kids are taking years, whereas kids in regular orthography nations are taking weeks and months. Okay. At least 1/3 have major difficulties if we use our English test norms, or just go and sit in a classroom and observe. Okay, at least 2/3 would have difficulties if we used regular orthography norms. Okay, for example, they tend to use less than 90% accuracy for reading long multisyllabic pseudo words, unfamiliar words, and I think most of our grade 5 kids would fail that. Okay, and many of our kids leave school with major word reading and spelling weakness, and they become adults and parents of the next generation. And we have generational disadvantage that goes on and on. Now, the Asian nations with their beginners orthography would sit between Finland and the Anglophone nations, but way up the Finnish end. Okay, their children too are very quickly independent, confident, skilled readers and writers for their beginnings orthography, and then they use that to transition to their main orthography, and they do it extremely effectively. That's why in Japanese classes teachers cope well with 37 children. Okay, in Anglophone nations, teachers struggle badly with 25 children. It's quite likely we need 2 teachers and a teacher aide for every 25 children. And may I encourage those of you who aren't academics and already reading the research widely to start looking at the research on this area. Talk about it, have conversations with your peers, encourage your politicians to go and observe kids in regular orthography nations when they're overseas, and your journalists and groups of teachers and what have you. And when you're there, just say, could we listen to your weakest 10% or third of readers read some of them, and would you show us their workbooks? And you'll have a look and you'll see, oh my goodness, their literacy levels are just so high compared to our weak readers. Okay, where would you start with reading the research? Well, start by reading great summaries. And may I recommend my recently released book, The Research Tours, The Impacts of Orthographic Disadvantage, where I have gone through and explored the research in 14 tours and discussed its practical implications and listed research questions we might continue. And it's an easy read. You'll enjoy it. Okay, it's also academic in terms of being highly accurate with about 780 studies and references cited. Okay, alternatively, you could go to ResearchGate or use your university library and download our 2017 book chapter, Managing Cognitive Load as the Key to Literacy Development, Research Directions Suggested by Cross-Linguistic Research, and Research on the Initial Teaching Alphabet. And that is, you can download that free from my profile on ResearchGate. A final draft copy of articles and chapters can be downloaded there. Okay, and then, so am I saying just read my work? No, not at all. What I'm saying is step 1, read the great summaries, and then step 2, locate and explore the studies that are discussed in those summaries, okay, that seem enticing, and you will find them. Seymour et al., the Welsh English studies of Spencer and Hanley, Frith, Landel and Wimmer's studies comparing German and English children, Kossue's study of children with intellectual disability, and what have you, okay? You will find them fascinating. So Anglophone nations very much need to consider orthographic disadvantage and cross-linguistic differences between us and other nations, and how we can close that gap. Okay, so let's briefly consider 5 useful models for exploring our severe orthographic disadvantage impacts towards optimising early literacy development. Why? Because orthographies make a massive difference. because English readers are lagging far, far, far behind. And this creates massive workload. If you've visited our schools, you'll see they are pressure cookers. We have a Find the Learning Time challenge that translates to a Find the Caring Time challenge that regular orthographies don't have, because regular orthographies make literacy far easy and quick with few kids with learning difficulties, and their schools are time rich and can focus on subject area learning, which we see when we look at PISA science, PISA maths, etc. Okay, so Anglophone nations, we need to close the gap. Each of the 5 models has its own research publication, published in highly reputable journals, and apart from the 10 changes model, which is detailed in my books, Bunyips in the Classroom, the 10 changes, and the research tours. And all 5 models are included in and discussed in the research tours. So you'll find them all there and be able to read about them then. And in fact, the figures that I'm using are directly from the research tours. The first model is the literacy component model. It builds from Hoover and Goff's simple view model of reading comprehension being language skills times word reading, but it's designed to be very, very practical and more detailed, and for use by schools and educators and academics and researchers. So it also includes written expression is language skills times word writing, and then all the things on the border, the aspects that interact with those and impact them. So we have cognitive load plus genetic, cognitive, behavioural, attitudinal, environmental, instructional, and child impacting factors. And do you see all the double-ended arrows there? We're saying these things aren't discrete, they are utterly interactive. We're encouraging people to explore double deficits, not just phonological awareness and what have you, and you'll see that little square down the right. Orthographic, phonological, optimising and visual skills are skills that underlie word reading and fluency and word writing. So we're encouraging people to go beyond and look at other double deficits, be it difficulties with rapid automised naming, be it and expressive language weakness, things like that. Model 2 is our TESOL model. TESOL is transition from early to sophisticated literacy. And if you see those diagrams, they are similar in that stage 1 is home literacy, stage 2 is early literacy, stage 3 is sophisticated literacy. And you'll also see that at the bottom, underneath the grey curve, you'll see core literacy, and above that you'll see continuing literacy. Okay, and then you'll see those double-ended arrows, transition from early to sophisticated literacy. Now compare the two figures. The top one is for Anglophone nations and no doubt Thailand. The bottom one is for regular orthography nations. Do you see how little grey area is there for the regular orthography nations? Because children are so quickly independent readers and writers. And do you see how there's very little grey in sophisticated literacy? Wow, wouldn't we love it if every child was an independent reader and writer by the start of grade 2? That is happening in other nations, okay? We are struggling. Our teachers are overburdened, trying to build reading and writing skills, trying to support struggling readers, having to adapt the text they're using, okay? We need to investigate change, and we need to use regular orthography nations as role models. Model 3 is the differential disadvantage model, and it's got part 1 and part 2, so I'll use 2 slides for it. And we're using the form here of the model that I have redone and is used in the research tours. So the first level of differential disadvantage is that our children are differential disadvantage of Anglophone weak readers. Firstly, they're disadvantaged against regular orthography weak readers. Okay, and I'll just read that quickly. Disadvantaged through not experiencing the strong expediting of early literacy development that children who learn to read and write regular orthography experience. Our kids miss out on the following benefits: ease of learning to read and write words once letter sounds are known, cognitive processing weakness and low intelligence not preventing mastery of word reading and word writing, word reading and spelling being mastered in the first school years or in the first month months of grade 1 for many nations, okay? Very low magnitude of word reading and spelling difficulties, tiny. The difficulties that Anglophone children have, English readers, are just massive compared to the children in regular orthography nations. Word reading remediation being of short duration and highly effective. Okay, their kids have caught up to adult. Well, for example, in Finland, they've caught up to adult level before our kids have caught up to, or a level of high school reading. Okay, and they have early literacy mastery. Okay, and that expedites their independent reading, writing, and learning, and their language development. Once they're literate, kids can develop later language skills, and their sophisticated literacy learning, which includes all subject area learning. Part 2 shows the differential disadvantage that our weak readers have against their Anglophone peers. Okay, we'll start top left, number 1. Weak readers often start with cognitive processing inefficiency in early literacy learning, and then they struggle to cope with the high cognitive load of learning to read and write. This, looking over towards top right, their disability traits are heightened, okay, because of the high cognitive load and weak literacy skills. They have ongoing weakness in early literacy skills. They're far from independent, highly dependent learners who are struggling with word reading and spelling. The vast majority of them are. And then their weak early language skills continue because there's no empowering from having great literacy skills. That language development gap is massive. Research is needed. Okay, and then the dotted line with the big arrow under it, okay, they then experience impeded transitioning from early to sophisticated literacy. A lot of these kids are still mastering word reading and spelling to a grade 2 level when they're in high school. That then gives them, they have weak cognitive processing, they have low self-efficacy, they don't believe in themselves, and they're experiencing really high cognitive load across subject area learning because of their weak literacy skills. Okay. Then we go over to bottom left. That's going to give them reduced career and life opportunities. More than likely they'll graduate high school, or not graduate high school, but they'll leave high school with very weak literacy and language skills. Okay, and again, as an adult, their disability traits will be heightened due to high cognitive load and weak literacy skills. Yes, just lots is happening. And then we get that cycle of generational disadvantage. Every time Anglophone education fails kids, to the extent that they leave school with poor reading and writing accuracy, we're so often influencing the next generation. Model 4 is the orthographic advantage theory model. Bruce Knight, Pam Gargett and I developed orthographic advantage theory, and starting from the top, it says that we have major impacting factors on early literacy development, and one of the most major, if not the most major, is the extent of orthographic complexity that beginning readers are going to face. But that in turn, just underneath it, creates the extent of cognitive load of learning to read and write words. Okay, and that's going to impact nations' extent of early education advantage, which includes extent of difficulties learning to read and write words and extent of cognitive load of literacy tasks using their reading and writing skills. And you see how that's the point where nations are going to diverge. Children who are independent readers and writers in the first term of grade 1 or first semester of grade 1 are going to be, it's going to be so much easier to teach in those schools and what have you. So schools and nations get their extent of early education advantage. Going from top right, of course, there are secondary impacting factors. There's children's processing capacity, there's excellence of instruction. We could add multilingualism in there because that helps develop children's executive function skills and what have you. Okay, and so heading down now from we've listed 6 areas of advantage. Extent of early education advantage, then we'll come down to extent of later education advantage. Which high school would you like to teach in? The one that's got 1/3 of children struggling with very poor reading and writing skills, or the one where children have been confident and literate since grade 1? The differences are simply massive. We need research with groups of teachers going and visiting and what have you. And then on the right-hand side there, we've also got extent of optimising education advantage. Other nations can fly past us because it's really easy to improve education when every child is literate from grade 1 and an independent learner. It is extremely difficult when our teachers and our children are struggling with high workload, lots of pressure, and often too many school improvement initiatives. Okay, going down to the bottom one, we've got, and I'll start from the right-hand side and go across, extent of adult life advantage. Adults who are highly literate do better on average in mental health, career opportunities, career training, income, you name it. Okay, then we've got extent of workplace and economic advantage. Have you noticed how much improvement nations such as Japan, China and Korea have done since the 1940s and 50s? When they moved to using two-stage early literacy with that beginner's orthography added in. They wiped out illiteracy and away they went. Yeah. And then on the left-hand side, bottom corner, we've got extent of generational advantage because we are creating ongoing cycles of we're being ineffective with our vulnerable kids. They're graduating high school with very poor literacy skills. They become the parents of the next generation who are shy about school, worried about school and feeling inadequate, which shows in various ways. And model 5 is my 10 changes model. Okay, so I've visited schools in many nations and talked with teachers there and talked with researchers, explored the research, and have also worked with children in Australia who have severe learning difficulties. Half of my work is private practice, working with children and their families. Okay, and I have arrived at 10 key directions that Anglophone nations need to explore. Now, the 10 changes are not musts. They are. We must explore these areas because there's so much research underlying them. And the research basis for that is, for the 10 changes, is established in my 2023 book, The Research Tours, The Impacts of Orthographic Disadvantage. So let's start from the bottom. Research shows that orthography is key. Regular orthography nations have strong, effective early literacy and intervention. Anglophone nations struggle badly in these areas. So then, moving up, regular orthography nations have the strong positives of orthographic advantage. Okay? Anglophone nations have the strong negatives of orthographic disadvantage. And I'll just bounce from one side to the other. So, regular orthography nations, low cognitive load in early literacy, high cognitive load for Anglophone nations, and also low cognitive load for early literacy, which is rapid. Okay, weeks to months. Rapid, easily acquired early literacy, slow, difficult literacy development in Anglophone nations. 6 years on average for word reading, 9 years on average for spelling to reach a reasonable level, not adult level. Okay, over on the left, few struggling readers and spellers. I mean, Finnish, 3%. Wouldn't we love it? Okay. On the right, excessive literacy difficulties, okay? And we need a lot more studies comparing our kids, the whole range. We want to know what how our high achievers, our top 5% and what have you are going, and we want to drill down into our lower, middle and upper thirds, and then in particular the weakest 10% of readers, 5% of readers, 2% of readers, and we need to look at them. Okay, on the left-hand side, lower child and teacher workload. On the right, extremely high child and teacher workload. On the left, easier, effective, less expensive education. May I say that again? Less expensive education. Okay, 37 kids in a grade 1 Japanese classroom, and the children are highly literate and independent learners. Okay, on the right-hand side, difficult, insufficiently effective, expensive education. And we're not spending nearly the money that we need to spend. And I'm talking of Australia here. America and the UK are providing much better resources there. Okay, and so moving up, we've then got, near the top, needs for Australia and Anglophone nations to explore and research areas of potential improvement, which leads us to the 10 changes, key directions towards impressively improved education. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I'll see if I can go down one slide. No, I'll stop here. And here I'll just read quickly through the 10 changes, but by all means go and read Bunyip's, go and read the research tours, or just go and download the 2-page information summary on key aspects of the Aussie Reading Rose trilogy and the 10 changes at my website susangalletly.com.au. Change 1, understand how orthographies matter. English spelling is dragging us down. Change 2, perhaps more an Australian than a wider Anglophone one, own our struggling reader woes, end hypocrisy and pretense. Australia so much needs to look at the resourcing that it's providing relative to children's rights for an effective education. Change 3, weigh workload. Our children and teachers are working far too hard, and it's when you compare, do cross-linguistic comparisons, that you really see it. Change 4, one-size education does not fit all. Teach to the decidedly different instructional needs of upper third and lower third readers. Let's meet their rights by providing the education that they need, tailoring it for them. Change 5, probably definitely an Australian one, end our data deficiency, because Australia does not assess word reading. Apart from in-school assessments in the first couple of years usually. Okay, so end our data deficiency, build strong knowledge on word reading levels. Change 6, enrich every child, ensure effective, supportive, tailored education. And then 7, 8, 9, they really are the big ones, okay? Change 7, insist on easier early literacy development, reach regular orthography nations achievement levels. Now, I'm not saying exceptional schools in regular orthography nations, but I am saying, well, don't all children have a right to literacy development that's as easy and effective as Taiwan, Japan, China achieve, nations with far more complex orthographies than we have, than those nations achieve routinely in every school across the nation. Okay, let's insist on easier early literacy development. Change 8, investigate the potential of fully regular beginners orthographies. Research shows they're key. From my research and the research that Professor Bruce Knight and I have done, orthographies and use of beginners orthographies is an absolute game changer. It just changes everything in terms of making literacy easier, in terms of easing teacher, child and school workload, reducing learning difficulties to an absolute fraction. Just so many advantages. So we really do need to research that area. And change 9, and I'm sorry I can't quite get rid of my picture from over the top of it, is first play to learn, start standard English word reading instruction, and behind the picture there says from mid-year 2. Okay, in Europe, children, Finland, Estonia, Norway, you name it, children are 7 and 8 years old when they're in grade 1. Okay, Anglophone nations, when starting on one of the world's hardest orthographies, we're setting our kids at it when they're 4.5 to 5. Teachers haven't got a chance to build the resilience and skills needed before the children are hit with learning to read and write, and failure sets in. We need to be researching acquired helplessness too. That is one of the research tours that I've got. Okay, so first play to learn. Start standard English word reading instruction from mid-year 2. Okay, and then change 10, build needed research knowledge as quickly as possible, use collaborative school-based research. And that's the 5 models. Now this slide looks similar to the one we've seen before, but see the blue line I've added in? Okay, reading the research can be fascinating. Read great summaries. Okay, for example, look up the articles about the 5 models. Go to my profile on ResearchGate if you want to download those articles, if you don't have access to a university library. Okay, read the research tours. It's a cheap ebook, okay, and a good read. Okay, or you can, buy the paperback copy. Okay, and there's that Managing Cognitive Load book chapter that Pam Gargett, Bruce Knight and I wrote in 2017 that you might like to download. Okay, and then don't just read my stuff, our stuff, okay? Locate and explore the studies that you come across that you think, wow, I really want to know more about that. And as a final slide, I've just included the references for those models and for the research tours. So do go to my website, susangalletly.com.au, and you can download the poster that these models were on. You can look at the references, and there are lots of other downloads, including the poster that I showed on the last slide, the high cost of orthographic disadvantage. There's a video a brief video on the homepage that discusses those issues. Thank you for listening to this.